Hi guys, welcome back to the desk corner. Welcome to a new video. I apologize for any noise you might hear outside that's due to construction, unfortunately. So today I'm very excited. I'm collaborating with another artist here on YouTube, Becky Tregear Art, and her and I have kind of been like YouTube friends for a little while now. In one of her videos from last year, she was actually testing out some supplies and drawing a turtle, and I really recognized that turtle, and then I realized that I had used that reference photo as well. I'll show you guys. It's a very popular photo. In case you guys want to use this, it's up on like Pixabay, I think, and maybe on Splash. Anyway, that turtle is very near and dear to my heart because back when I worked at an art studio a couple years ago, I painted this turtle quite a few times with watercolors. Let me show you guys the watercolor turtles here. I managed to salvage 2 of them. I might have more. Don't really know where they are. Anyways, I thought it would be fun to go back and revisit this and just recreate it. I'm going to leave the link to Becky's video in the description down below. I'm very excited to see what she's going to do with this turtle. Now I think I've actually decided that I'm going to use my Faber-Castell Albrecht-Dürer watercolor pencils. Oh, it looks like I already have my water brush in here. The turtle, let me pull out the photo for you guys to see again, has so many little details and things like that. It might be easier to go in there with a pencil initially. So yeah, I hope that this turns out well. I think I'm going to use my Arches hot pressed watercolor paper because it seems to work very well with watercolor pencils. And yeah, let's just go ahead and jump into it, and I'm gonna start doing the sketch. So to get my sketch, I started by just transferring the picture from my iPad onto the paper, so I didn't freehand that part, and then I just sketched in all those tiny little scale details, which I knew was going to take me forever. And I actually made the decision to pull out my microns and actually fine line a lot of the details because I figured because watercolor pencils tend to become a little bit fuzzy and messy when you start to actually apply the water to them, I really didn't want to lose the detail in this drawing or sacrifice that, so I knew that in order to not mess it up, I would have to pretty much outline it first. I do apologize for the paper shifting around so much because I didn't tape it down and I wanted to be able to move it around depending on what area I was working on. So I wanted a little bit more freedom with this one, and so I didn't tape it down. Also, unlike with watercolor paint, which I would use more water naturally, with watercolor pencil I'm not going to use quite as much water, and therefore my paper is not going to like buckle as much, and it's not going to be as much of an issue. The funny thing, you guys, is I almost made the decision not to fine line the turtle, and the reason was because I wanted to go more for realism and I didn't want there to be too many defining lines, but then I just realized it would turn into a muddy mess with the way that the water brush works and watercolor pencil and all of that, and unless I was extremely careful of detail and took an extra long time to do this, I don't think that would have worked out very well for me because I would have probably smudged things all over the place and forgotten where there are supposed to be separations between the details. So I'm very glad that I ended up fine lining this, and I think when I start adding in the color here, you'll see that it still just looks really nice, and the fine liner doesn't make a huge difference. It doesn't look like extremely unrealistic because of it. The style that I'm going for here is somewhat realistic, of course, a little bit more washy, and I wanted it to still look like watercolor. I didn't want it to turn into something that looks like I used colored pencil or something else. I just wanted it to look like that watercolor pencil effect, and I hope that I was able to achieve that here. I had a really fun time with those big scale patterns on the top of the turtle's shell. What are they? I don't know. Patterns. The patterns on the top of the shell were so much fun. I was using my bright colors, which is so much fun for me. I don't usually use bright colors very often, and I was trying to reflect where the light was coming from the light source at the top. I wanted that to still show in my piece as well, and I just really like how this part of the turtle came out. Things got a little bit trickier as we moved down, you guys will see, but for this part I was just having a really fun time adding in all those colors. I'm sure that Becky is having an equally fun time with whatever medium that she has chosen. I think that the smaller scales on the bottom were fun to do in the end, they were worth it, but really that colorful bright turtle shell on the top is so much fun, so I'm curious to see what she did with it and what medium she used, if she went the dry medium or wet medium route, or maybe she did mixed media. I don't know, because we didn't discuss specifically what we were going to do, and that way it would be a bit of a surprise for us both. This is my second watercolor pencil piece this year. I kind of am revisiting it a little bit. Before that, I took quite a long hiatus from watercolor pencil, but I guess as I've worked on a couple pieces with it now, I could give a few tips or make a few more videos about this medium if you guys are interested in that. What I will say though, what I learned from this specific illustration, drawing / painting, I don't know which one it is, I think since it looks like a painting in the end, you can call it a painting. So I'll just call it a painting. But something I learned with this painting especially is that when you want highlighted areas, you really need to leave those areas white and not cover them with even your lightest pencil, because what happens is you end up spreading some of the pigment anyway with your brush. So let's say you have yellow next to a highlight, a little of that yellow will spread into that highlight, and that's okay because it gives a little bit of that underlayer color, so it's not just a bright white highlight. But at the same time, if I had covered that whole highlighted area with yellow, then it would just be like a bright yellow and it wouldn't have any hint of white, and the values would just not be right. So definitely leave a larger highlighted area than what you would think that you're supposed to leave, because once you add water, a lot of it smudges around and gets a little bit muddy. And I'm going to end up skipping around a little bit, which I tend to do, honestly. I guess that's just my style of working. I don't know, do you guys like to work that way? Do you skip around and move around a bit? You get bored of certain areas and come back to them later? Do you want to see how it looks overall, so you want to make sure each area kind of has like areas done so you can see how the piece is coming together, if that makes sense? Or do you prefer to kind of just finish off one section and move on to the next? So back to what I was saying earlier about leaving highlighted areas, this was a little trickier when I was working on smaller scales. Some of them did have highlights that I was trying to be careful to leave. Now on the fins, there weren't quite as many highlights that I had to worry about on the scales, so most of the time I was just trying to make sure that it didn't look flat and that I was using a couple different colors like middle cadmium red and walnut brown and a little bit of burnt sienna, sometimes yellow, to just kind of shake it up a little bit and make sure that there's dimension going on and all those little tiny scale details, and it's not just one flat color, which is what I was kind of worried about happening. Another thing that sort of came to my attention was that the way I drew the turtle, I could have drawn it a little bit more towards the left of the paper. It's not anything drastic. I go in later and do a tiny bit of a background, not much, but I do hints of a background, which helps to balance out the paper. But at first I was thinking that I might actually have to trim it a little bit. I don't think that's the case anymore now that it's actually done. But I was a little bit annoyed at the unevenness here, and it's nothing even that big, but I'm very particular about how my drawing is centered on a piece of paper, and I don't know why I'm like that. Oh, and you can see me going and adding some more dark value and adding a second layer really to parts of the shell that I wanted to be darker and just add more dimension with, which is something I struggle with while using watercolor mediums because media, I guess, they start to lighten up, and when you add water, it looks like it's going to be really vibrant, but then it dries and it's not quite as vibrant as it looked like when it was wet, so you kind of have to go in sometimes and add some more shadows or add some more layers all over in general to kind of deepen up that color, make it look rich and just like more saturated. And my struggle is maintaining that while still getting that flowy watercolor loose look, which I got a little bit here. It's a little more defined, but I was still able to give it a nice washy look, I think. I will chime in here and say that this part took me quite a while and it turned out to be really tedious, I think, just shading in and then going over with the water all those tiny little shell details and being careful, trying not to smudge the paint or the pigment around everywhere was a little bit tedious, I have to admit, and it wasn't the most fun part for me of this painting or drawing, and it definitely took me a while to get through this part actually, because I kept going over it and trying to make sure that it was dark enough and that it just looked good enough and all of that. So this part, not quite as fun as the rest, but I'm glad that I ended up going through with it, and it actually turned out looking really nice, I think, because I've got those details in, as well as kind of that larger shell area at the top that has all those nice colors blending together. So it's kind of a nice contrast. I will mention too that I went in with a gray fine liner and started adding a few more scale details on like the underbelly and the under fin, I guess you could say, and also on the neck and face area as well. And that was just kind of for the extra effect of having more details in there. I don't know if you can really tell the difference between the gray and the sepia fine liner, but that's okay. I thought it would be fun to have a couple different colors going on there. And then I'm just working kind of on that area between the shell and the fin. But I'm about to get to a really fun part here, which is adding in some cool colors and some like turquoise looking oceany colors that just reflect off the bottom of the belly, I guess the underbelly of the turtle. So we have got some cobalt green and like phthalo green and cobalt blue, I believe, or maybe it was cobalt turquoise, I don't know. But we have a lot of really pretty blues and greens that are going to complement all those reds and yellows and oranges and burnt sienna colors, very warm tones. It's going to complement it very nicely. And this was probably my favorite part, was watching it come together as I added in these blues and greens. I just love turquoise colors. They're my favorite colors ever, and it just made this turtle look way more, I guess, ocean-like. It just gave it a nice watercolor vibe to it, as I have made this very colorful. And the reference photo is colorful as well, but the effect of using watercolor pencils really amps up that color. Oh, and you can see I'm adding hints of that in the fins as well to kind of just add some contrast there and make it a little more interesting and less boring in some of those areas that are kind of repetitive, I guess you could say. And we are wrapping up on this painting, you guys. I'm adding black, which I only do at the very end. I want to be very careful for that not to muddy up my drawing too much or give too much of like a gray undertone, so I'm only using that at the end here and deepening up contrast where I need to. And then we're going to start working on the background, which for me this part was risky but fun. I'm very afraid of backgrounds, and I really kind of sat there for a while wondering if I should even do a background. Then I decided to just add some hints of water in the background, because how is that going to hurt? And that'll give the drawing a little bit more movement and flow, and also more contrast and complement all those colors very nicely. I guess I wanted to just have an excuse to use my beautiful blue colors a little bit more than I got to use for the rest of the drawing as well. And that ended up going better than expected, I would say. I was very careful when I started to color. I was kind of scribbling a little bit, but I was careful not to like add too much pigment, because I knew once I added water, it would just become really vibrant. I didn't want this to be too dark, and I didn't want it to take away from the turtle, which is supposed to be the center of this as well. So as you guys watch me do this, I just want to thank you so much for watching today's video and remind you to go ahead and watch Becky's video after this and see what she did with this sea turtle. You were using the same exact reference photo, and I'm very curious to see what medium she used and how hers ended up turning out. And let me know what you thought of this one in the comments down below as well. Thank you guys as always so much for watching today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Might have been a little bit long for you guys to watch all of that, all of those details and everything, but thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, I will see you guys in the next video, and I'll show you a little probably photo at the end here or something of the final piece. Bye guys!